are online and ready to go. And what is that shirt say? Smart?
S-Mart. You ever seen the movie Army of Darkness?
No, I missed that one. Was it
Yeah, it's the third in the Evil Dead trilogy, and Bruce Campbell's main character Ash worked at S-Mart.
Yeah. Okay. Well, wherever the hell that is, it sounds to me that there's monsters probably residing there.
Probably so. Yeah. Well, there definitely are. They're called Deadites, and he uses a chainsaw hand to take care of them.
Is that what you watch for enjoyment, Jason?
Yeah, it sure is.
Okay. So you particularly like the kind of movies that have a high body count.
High body count. Yep, sure do.
A lot of
During my
dismemberment.
impressionable years, it was lots of Schwarzenegger and Stallone shooting people. But if I can get monsters in it too, I'm cool.
Okay, maybe some cannibalism that cheer you up a little bit.
Well, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, we had a discussion at the breakfast table a couple of weeks ago. My 14-year-old, 12-year-old, my wife and I were talking about, I don't know, the kids came up with it, is there a moral way to be a cannibal? By the way, we were having pancakes and bacon, so yeah, no human flesh on the menu that morning.
I see. Well, I'll tell you what, Jason, we'll be talking about your book, Chasing American Monsters, and certainly there are a lot of monsters out there, and while some of it might be tongue in cheek, the reality is there is an unseen world out there, and it's been talked about in length in many guest on this program. So, when you start talking about monsters, it's just not, what's your favorite story? I mean, you may be talking about the real thing of the existence of monsters.
Right. There are so many firsthand accounts of these things, of encounters with Bigfoot and with the Goat Man and the Wampus Cat. Over the not just years, decades, but centuries, and with Bigfoot especially across the entire planet, there are real monsters out there that are unknown to science, and yeah, let's talk about some of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I was reading down the list of monsters that you do talk about in the book, I just gravitated right toward modern day dinosaurs here in this country.
Here in this country, there are lots of stories. There, some which to me are a little bit less believable than others. There have been a few people in Colorado over the years who've reported seeing theropod dinosaurs. Your two-legged little short arms like your T-Rexes or your Velociraptors, and they've also been seen in Texas, Oklahoma, Arizona, and New Mexico. I think if those were running around, somebody would have hit one with a car by now. But the potential living dinosaur stories that I am really intrigued with are the flying ones, the pterodactyl reports. There have been reports from North Carolina. And this is just in the United States. These things are worldwide. Mm-hmm. But yeah, North Carolina, California, New Mexico, Arizona. There was a case in the 1970s of three teachers were coming back from a conference, and all of a sudden they got underneath a shadow, and they thought, well, is that a cloud? And one of them looked out the window, and there was a pterodactyl flying over their car. And, I think teachers would probably know what a pterodactyl looked like.
Mm-hmm. There's stories of something called the Thunderbird. Is that being mistaken for a pterodactyl?
No, that's another potential animal that died during the Pleistocene. Well, of course, the pterodactyls died 66 million years ago. But the Thunderbird could very well be a teratorn. Teratorns were like vultures. Like turkey buzzards that lived during the Pleistocene era, but they had a wingspan of like 20 feet. Mm-hmm. They were the size of a small airplane, and people have seen them now a lot on the in New England, quite a few in New England, some in way off spots. Where there are not a lot of people like Utah, and there was a pilot was flying in Alaska, and one of these enormous birds flew past him, and he flew along with it for a while and got a really good look at it. So yeah, Thunderbirds, they were called Thunderbirds Native Americans throughout the country and Canada, so throughout the continent, had these legends of the Thunderbirds, and the reason the word thunder came was because that was the sound it made whenever it took off, and its wings beating sounded like thunder. So I mean, it's those things very well could have survived the ice age, and are hidden off in some remote areas.
Are there specific monsters for specific states, or are they interspersed between the different states? They could be here and there and scattered around that type of thing, or are they particular to geographical areas?
I'm going to answer that question with a yes. There are a lot of monsters that are spread all over the country, spread all over the continent, and there are some monsters that are just to certain states. For example, I mean, Bigfoot. He's been reported. There have been Bigfoot reports in 49 of the 50 states. The only state that hasn't had a Bigfoot report's been Hawaii. Maybe Bigfoot doesn't like to swim that much. I don't know. But Bigfoot's an interesting one because not only have there been reports throughout the centuries of Bigfoot in North America, there are stories of big hairy wild men in Europe, across Europe. There's the Alma in Russia. There's the Yeren in China, the Yowie in Australia, and there was the story of.
Wait a minute. I don't know if this was you. If you were the guest that I asked this question, if you shoot a Yowie, would a Yowie have an owie?
No, yeah, it wasn't me, but I remember listening to that show. Okay. He didn't really know quite what to make of the question.
I can't believe that question came up. I've got like a liner that I play, and I can't remember who I asked that question to.
And well, in Africa, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there were stories of tribesmen way off the beaten path, who told people about this enormous ape that was ferocious. It could kill lions, and it howled at the moon. And people didn't believe that. By people, I mean Westerners, scientists. They didn't believe that at all. But in 1998, they found that yes, this thing actually exists. This enormous, upright, walking on 2 feet ape that is capable enough to kill a lion.
Wow.
This sounds very Bigfootish to me. And one of the things about Bigfoot, and I've been thinking about this a lot. Native Americans and First Nations peoples of Canada didn't consider this an animal. They considered the Sasquatch just another person. Big hairy persons that sometimes stole and ate their children, and sometimes stole their women, but they also occasionally traded with them. And those stories, really hit home to me when I started, reading a lot about DNA research on supposed Bigfoot, hair samples, stool samples, blood samples. Dr. Melba Ketchum and her project, the DNA samples came back as human, but with an anomaly. And a Bigfoot researcher in Canada had hair from a Bigfoot. He saw the Bigfoot leave the hair, brush up against a tree. So he knew it was from a Bigfoot. And when he had it analyzed, it was human, but with an anomaly. There's a researcher in England who took DNA samples, spit samples from the descendants of an Alma named Zana. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this story. Back in the mid 1900s, in a far off village, these Russian villagers captured a really large, hairy wild woman, and they brought her back to the village, and she was wild, and finally they tamed her, and some of the men had sex with her, and she produced offspring. Yes, I just said that. And she produced offspring, and the offspring then produced offspring, and the scientists hunted down these offspring and took DNA samples, and what the samples came back as were human, but with something anomalous with them. So the big question that I have is, if the Native Americans thought they were people, and there are some reports of Bigfoot that they have a human face, and if DNA samples of Bigfoot come back as human, maybe they are. Maybe they're just part of our family.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, we've got numbers of questions coming in for you, Jason. Let's go ahead and get to some of those. It says, do you, this is from Azure, I believe from our YouTube chat. We have several chats going on. Do you think the modern idea of the monster is actually genetic engineering experimentation of fallen angels through the ages of time?
Wow, I have no idea. But some of the, some of the explanations of these, why not? There's a creature in Washington State called Bat Squatch that around the time when Mount St. Helens was going to blow. This is before it happened. People started reporting seeing this Bigfoot that the hair was purple and it had bat wings. And whenever it was near somebody's vehicle, like it landed in front of them or it stepped in front of the road, in the road in front of the car, the car's electricity would go off, the electronics would go off until it took to the sky and flew away. I don't really have an explanation for a bat squatch. I also don't have explanations for goat men, other than the legendary Pan from Greek mythology. But at that point, I've heard a lot of people say when the Nephilim came down and they bred with human women that things like that happened. So
Well, I'll imagine the Muslims would have some good times with a goat man there. Let's get into this question here. Overbuilt Automotive says there have been stories of dogmen in Tennessee and Kentucky.
Right, dogmen kind of stretch across the continent, just like Sasquatch does. There's not as many encounters, but there are some. A lot in Michigan, in Michigan Dogman. We've got the Beast of Bray Road up in Wisconsin, and I've talked with people from Illinois. I've interviewed people from Arizona who've seen these dogmen, and a couple of people I personally know have encountered dogmen here in Missouri. One of them was about in the middle of the state. There's a small town called Brunswick, and just north of it, off of a rural highway, there's a dirt road. And go down the dirt road, up and down a couple of hills, and there's a cemetery. And he and his friends would do ghost investigations at that cemetery. And one night, he was up there with one of his buddies, and not much activity was happening, and they decided to go call it a night and go home. Well, they went down one of the hills on this dirt road and was overhanging with trees, really horror movie type setting, and there was a dog, a really big dog in the middle of the road, like it was bent over, like it was eating something from roadkill or something, and they had their windows down. And they stopped about 10 yards away from it, expecting it to get spooked by the truck and run off, and it didn't. And they could smell, it was warm, so they had the windows down. They could smell wet dog in the air. And they beeped the horn, and the thing turned around and turned its head and looked at them. And then it stood up on its hind legs and walked off the road into the into the woods, staring at them the whole time. And its eyes were glowing, kind of a yellowish glow in the headlights. And they didn't go back there for quite a while.
I don't think I would either. But Jason, let me ask you something. A lot of times when there are sort of the disappearing monsters, particularly in a Bigfoot category, some people speculate that they're really interdimensional beings and they're just simply going in and out of dimensions at a certain point. And for some reason or other, they disappear into the forest. Maybe there are portals that reside in the forest. I don't know. But is it possible they're going through interdimensionally, or are they going to layers as in LAIRS, somewhere under the ground that we can't see, which is more likely of a possibility?
Well, the more likely, I'm skeptical by nature, meaning I want enough evidence to make me believe. It's not, a lot of skeptics are just going to reject everything off the top. And I'm more of a traditional skeptic, to where I'm going to believe it when I get enough evidence. And when it comes to Bigfoot, I think there's enough evidence to show that it's there. I like to think of it as a flesh and blood terrestrial creature. However, there are so many stories like that to where it just disappears. And not just, it's in the woods and somebody's, watching it and it disappears. I mean, there are footprints that just stop in the middle of nowhere and the creature's gone. I would like to think that maybe it's got a hidden lair that it go there. They have hidden lairs they go to, but I'm also interested in what John Keel, the great paranormal researcher John Keel, wrote back in the early '70s about window areas, and that would explain a lot of things from Bigfoot to Mothman to time slips, things like that. That there are just some places on Earth where the boundaries between dimensions or times are really thin, and every once in a while they get thinner, and something can just walk through.
Right.
Yeah. Could this be Bigfoot? Maybe. I don't know, but it's a possibility.
No, I'm definitely a believer in thin places. I think that explains a lot. For instance, you go to a certain cemetery, if you are looking with a electronic device, if you have a EVP meter or something, and it goes off, you may go to another one and there's not. And I think the reason is because geographically there are thin places that way. And I think a lot of people have stories where they go to a specific spot and they feel like there's something to that. They feel like the hair raising on the back of their neck, or they feel like somebody's watching them, but they go somewhere else. So that just tells me and I'm sure the Indian culture believes that there are thin places. That is what they may call holy sites and various things. And I think there's a holy site out west, and I can't remember the mountain, but somebody bought the mountain and put a telescope on there because they believe right there was a thin place, and they try to capture the energy of that area. I can't remember the name of that one. Well, let's get another question here for you. It says, this is from Monster Madhouse. Have you seen the photographs of pterodactyls killed in the 1800s?
Yes, I have. I don't really know what to think of them because I don't trust photographic evidence, after a certain point, because. And I'm not that great at Photoshop, but I can make something believable. So, I mean, photo evidence, there's so much trickery with photography, video, and still. I would like to see a copy of the newspaper that this picture originally appeared in. And what it is I don't know, there's 5, 6, 7 cowboys holding up a pterodactyl that they'd shot and tied a rope around and dragged it back to town. I think it might have been Tombstone, Arizona, actually. So if I could see an original picture, I'd put a heck of a lot more stock in that than something that just appeared.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Azur from our YouTube chat mentioned the name of that mountain. I believe it was Mount Graham. Is that there's a lot of mystery surrounding that area there. Somebody said, for your information, this is Mexico Unexplained. He says, in Mexico, there are 2 Bigfoot creatures. Now, I probably get this wrong, but it says the Sisimite and the... Now, see, he needs to get on the line here and give me some of this Mexican verbiage. The Cuauhtlacas. How'd I do with that, Mexico Unexplained? All right, here's another one for you. Now, you talk about monsters, though, and somebody mentioned the... perhaps experimentation. Wasn't there a monster that washed up on shore, some creepy laboratory area, and that was say the Montauk monster? That was
the Montauk monster. Yes.
That washed up on shore.
Yeah, it was a hairless, and it looked like it had a beak. I'm not sure what that was. A couple, I think it was, were walking along the rocks there at Montauk near the beach, and they saw this, and they took a couple of pictures with their phone, but went back home and got a better camera and took more pictures, and the animal control people in that area said it looked like a pig. It was not a pig because it had claws. Right. I know for sure it wasn't a pig. I have no idea what that was. But there was something very similar to that found in Minnesota as well a few years ago. It looked a whole lot like the Montauk monster. Well,
just to get off the terrestrial land, my wife and I went to see Aquaman. I mean, you said chasing American monsters. Well, of course, we have shores. Therefore, i.e., we got oceans. So therefore, i.e., do we have mermaids out there?
There have been mermaid reports. All over the Atlantic and forever. People have said that speculated that when European sailors came over here, the mermaids they saw were manatees, and I'm not sure what kind of women were in Europe, back in the 1700s, but if they looked like manatees, I'm a little worried. But I don't really buy that.
Well, the Europeans probably turned on by that kind of thing, so I don't know.
Down in I think it's Alabama, a river down in Alabama. There's a legend of mermaids and mermen in this river, because there was a peaceful American Indian tribe and neighbors that wanted to get rid of them. We're going to go to war with them, and when they came to do war with them, the tribe, got an idea about it ahead of time, and went into this river, and they drowned. The whole tribe drowned itself, and legend has it is that they became mermaids and mermen, and it's called the Singing Lake because it makes it sounds like people singing, and they accredit that to the mermaid.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, and of course the merman. I mean, that can be some nasty stuff right there. All right, then we got this question here. If you were to classify this known monster, what would you classify it as? Demonic or a predatory monster known as Hillary?
Yeah. Well, it's not wearing a pantsuit, so it can't be Hillary.
Okay, that would make her a merman, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the Montauk monster, and as you can see, I mean, by its front paws, it's not a pig.
No.
I have no idea what that is, but the head and face are frankly terrifying.
Yeah.
It could actually be an animal that we know, and the nose is just gone. That's part of the skull. Right. I can't speculate what it is.
Yeah. This question comes from Canada for you, Jason. It says, hi, Daniel. Great guest you have. It says, we hear old stories of knights slaying dragons. Were natives here dealing with dragons or dinosaurs of some kind?
Yes. There were, South America, there were there were dinosaurs stories. But here in North America, around Illinois and Missouri, there was a dragon called a piasa, and it was an intelligent feathered dragon. But the wings were feathered, but it also had scales, and it would fly, and it would do what dragons tend to do, which was steal people and take them away to eat them. But they had a dragon legend. And that's something else that has fascinated me for years. How come there are dragon legends in North America, South America? I mean, Quetzalcoatl, their chief god, for the Aztecs.
Right.
That was a dragon. There were dragon stories in Europe, China, Japan, Russia, Africa, Australia, everywhere. How come dragon stories are all over the planet if, science says, dragons never existed?
Mm-hmm. There's that dragon movie, Reign of Fire. Took place, the setting was in England. They were digging down a tunnel. Have you ever seen that movie?
No, I know what you're talking about, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seemed plausible enough because what it was basically the dragon who lived underground for some time had 2 sacks of chemicals, and certainly there's a bug out there that some kind of roast looking thing that shoots fire out of its mouth by mixing 2 type of chemicals. So a fire breathing dragon isn't that outrageous of speculation when there's already evidence that there's entities that do that already.
Yeah. Well, and I just think if there are similar stories that there's got to be something to it. Mm-hmm. One of the things that dragons could be are dinosaurs that lived past the extinction, the major extinction back 65 million years ago. There was a story in Spain about a dragon that back in 1200, 1300 maybe, of a dragon that terrorized the town and the area around it. And the description of it is it had a shield behind its head and 3 lances that came off of its face.
Wow.
That sounds like a triceratops.
Sounds freaky, at least.
Well, at least, but I mean, it sounds like a dinosaur. So, I mean, could these things? I seriously think dinosaurs, in some far off spot, could have survived the extinction. That's what I really love. So the stories of Mokalia Mamimbe from, I think it's the Congo, and the description that the people who live in this area, these tribes that live in this area. They gave this description of the long neck, that shook the earth when it walked. It had a big body, a long tail, 4 legs and feet like an elephant. And whenever they were shown a picture of an Apatosaurus, they said, "This is it. This is the Mokalia Mamimbe." Why couldn't an Apatosaurus have survived in the middle of Africa?
Well, anything with the name of Mamimbe is cool with me. Now, let somebody think they know every animal that exists. Now, in my dumb old way, because I'm just a cowboy, I always thought that roadrunners, you had roadrunners and you had Wile E. Coyote. So I always thought that was a joke. Well, so one day I'm driving with my wife in Arkansas, and these 2 creatures are running down the road. I said, "What are those things?" She goes, "Those are roadrunners." So I'm thinking, "Are you kidding me, man? Where's Wile E. Coyote?" And they were roadrunners. So to me, roadrunners didn't exist. You see where I'm going with that?
Well, but they do.
But they do.
Yes.
I didn't know that doesn't make them not exist. They did exist. I just didn't know it.
Right. Well, and there's so many cases of this. The gorilla, stories of the gorilla. When Europeans went to Africa and started exploring, they thought the story of the gorilla was just complete bunk until we saw one. And all the Africans who lived around the gorillas area, of course they knew the gorillas were real. The same as with the panda. I don't think it was until 1916 to where Europeans said, "Hey, wait a second, that panda thing is actually real." There were wood bison that had been thought extinct for a long, long time until a herd of them were found in 1957. The megamouth shark, which is 18 feet long, was thought to have died out in the Precambrian extinction, but they discovered some in 1976. So there's a lot of things out there that we know used to exist that very well probably could. They can pull a plesiosaur out of the ocean at some point.
Well, those who've been watching the program for a long time know, they've probably heard this story from me. We're going back to thin places. When I went to a house that was haunted, there was probably 5 or 6 people standing there at the top of these stairs, and the door just slammed by itself. And with such force, you think would have knocked it off the hinges. And so it wasn't like a breeze coming through there. But the fact is, something came from somewhere and manifested in the physical realm and did something. Though it was invisible to the eyes, a physical event happened. Therefore, that tells me that area was a thin place, and whatever was at that thin place could come in and out, maybe not even manifest physically, but had the power to move objects in this realm. So if whatever that was could slam a door, that tells me there could be other things that there are thin places. That makes the thin place, to me, more real than anything that I've heard, is that things can come and go from another dimension if you are in the right location.
Right. And that would, explain a lot of shadow people encounters as well, because there are a lot of encounters that people will see a shadow person, and the shadow person will be watching them, and then it looks surprised when it notices somebody sees it, and it turns around and runs and disappears. Where did it go to? It could have been a thin place.
And here's this is not a monster part, but I mean, really, this goes into the fascinating Earth. So lest somebody think they have all the answers and know everything and assume that what is real and what they know is all thing. A simple story came across my purview the other day. It was a study about flowers in England. And they discovered that when a bee comes by and vibrates within 4 or 5 inches, that plant hears that and generates 20% more nectar. And the scientists, for a control, they generated computer-generated noises, vibrations from other things, but the bee coming by, which demonstrated to them that plants can hear. And of course, there have all been anecdotal stories and probably even evidence of people talking to plants and having responses from plants. So to me, that shows a more connected universe, a more interesting and alive universe than we ever could possibly imagine, even in the mundane things around us, because we can get so caught up in just the normal activities of life. But life itself is bursting with mysteries. And so I really appreciate you talking about them and really doing research on them.
Well, thank you. And when it comes to plants, I read a story about another experiment, and they had a control group that they just treated like they were plants. They water them and have plenty of light, but they wouldn't interact with the plants. And they had another group of plants that they interacted with. They played music, they sang, they talked nicely to the plants. And then they had another one where they yelled at the plants, and were really negative to the plants. And the control group was just like plants would be. Mm-hmm. The ones that they sang to, played music, and spoke with, they grew bigger than the control group. And the plants that they yelled at and were really negative to didn't grow as big, even as the control group did. Mm-hmm. So here's the problem I have. We've got vegans saying we shouldn't eat meat. Now, doesn't this say we shouldn't eat plants? How the heck are we going to survive? That's what I want to know.
Well, exactly. But we just don't eat nothing, man. I don't know. So you're right. Everything's a problem with some people. Here's Doug White asked this question here. Are some of these sightings that people see actually time slips?
Oh, very well could be. I am absolutely fascinated by time slips, and I've talked to a number of people who've experienced time slips, and I think it's another window area. Mm-hmm. A thin spot where you step through and you're in a different time. I think that's very plausible, and again, with all the stories I've heard, I think it's quite possible that could happen.
Well, then that begs a larger question. How do we know that from second to second, or even when we wake up, that we're not in the same dimension as we were the day before? How do we know that?
Right. Something could have happened. Time travel could have been discovered in a lab someplace, and somebody had gone back in time and changed something really small, and we are not in the same dimension. I mean, the Mandela effect, if you're familiar with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of the Mandela effect to me sounds like, okay, you're just not remembering correctly. But I have brought it up, because I teach at a university, and I'll occasionally bring it up in my class. And a lot of times some students just ask me about it in class anyway. And then I ask them a couple of questions, and I am shocked at the number of people who misremember things. Mm-hmm. The big one is the movie Shazam, starring Sinbad, the comedian, which never existed. It was a movie by a different name, Kazam, starring Shaquille O'Neal. Mm-hmm. But I've had quite a few students who said, no, I know who Shaquille O'Neal is. I know who Sinbad is, and I saw a movie with Sinbad in it. And they might have misremembered, but they also we might have had a dimensional shift. Mm-hmm.
And now all things need to be tested, and I'll tell you how this. You talk about the Mandela effect. We had several guests on the program talking about and debating the Mandela effect. So one of the classics to me is that I'm not budging on is Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It's not a wonderful day in this neighborhood. It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood. It's always been the. I don't care what they say. It's not this. But so all right. So my wife's out. Me and my wife's out, and have a couple beers, and I'm I'm hammering on this pinball, showing some kids what a professional pinball wizard looks like, plays like, setting some records, slamming some balls. And by the way, I managed to play pinball with 4 balls on the table at the same time. Well, okay.
Okay. Do you shake the machine? Do you slap the machine?
It knows it. Okay, it tells me when I'm about ready to tilt it. Now there's a finesse there. Okay, you give a little finesse, but you push. You know you're gonna tilt it, so you got to do some
Called body language. Yeah,
a little body language.
English,
They don't see young kids. They don't understand it. They play pinball. They be looking at a cell phone while they're playing. How do I win this game? You know, get out of here. You're stupid. But anyway, so we're driving home, and I am hyped, man. I'm hyped. I'm ready to go. So I get my phone, get the truck playing a song that I wanted to hear right then. I wanted to hear. All Right Now by Free. You know who that is from the 70s?
Yeah.
All Right Now.
Right now,
baby.
yeah.
And so, anyway, anybody who knows that song, classic rockers like you and me, we know that in the middle of the song, it starts all over like it does in the beginning. Wow! Bam, bam, bam. Well, it didn't. And I go, what? I was looking forward to that. I was ready to rock, man. I was screaming. And I was ready to hit that second part, and it didn't come. So what the hell's happening here? So I pulled up another YouTube. I'm driving. I shouldn't have done it, but I'm driving. I pulled up another YouTube, and I hit Free, another version of Free right now. And wait for it, and it's not there. I said, I'm not budging. This thing is messed up. We have just hit Mandela on Free all right now. But then I got home, and I pulled another one up. It was a longer version, and it was in there. So I was thinking, whew, okay, at least I didn't go too far with the Mandela. But anyway, you got to test things. What I'm saying, you got to test things.
Right. I mean, that happens to me. I will hear a song I hadn't heard in 15, 20 years, and I'll know every word to it. And then I'll hear another song that I hadn't heard in, 2 weeks, and I know it like the back of my hand, and, it's different than what I remembered. Is it my old addled brain? I don't know. Or is it the Mandela effect?
Uh-huh.
This is one of the things whenever, whenever time travel is, it very well could have been, discovered already. And people might be traveling back all the time. That's what this Mandela effect might be. Somebody might, talk somebody out of marrying somebody else. Well, that's going to change everything.
Isn't starlight hundreds of years old? That when we look up and see that star, isn't that light 4, 5, 10, 20, 30 years old?
Well, no, it's got to be a lot older than that because of the distance. Mm-hmm. Thousands of years old. Yeah. Yeah. So some of those stars that we see at night don't exist anymore.
Exactly. That's my point. And so that to me is sort of a time slippage in and of itself. In other words, right there's evidence that there may be civilizations out there, but if there was civilizations advanced enough for time travel, they would already be way so far in the future that they could come back to us. And at this time, if they wanted to, so that's how it could exist.
Right. Well, and that's somebody speculated that the grays that are so common, that might be us. 40,000 years from now, that might be what we've evolved into.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have this question from Kevin in Massachusetts. He used the Fast Blast link we have on the website. It says, Jason, are you familiar with the Bridgewater Triangle? Giant birds, Bigfoot, giant snakes, pukas, and other monsters are said to live in the New England area.
Yes, and yes, absolutely. I think some puckwudgies are there as well.
You say puckwudgie?
Yeah, I am familiar with that. The Bridgewater Triangle. A lot of fun, creepy, scary stuff has happened there.
Mm-hmm. Did you say something? A punk water wedgie?
Yes, a puckwudgie. Oh. This is another story that absolutely fascinates me. Little people, legends are all over. Yes, I just. Legends are all over the world of diminutive humans, 2 to 3 feet tall, the size of a child, but they're adults. We have, elves, trolls, kobolds from Germany. We got, tomtars, which are gnomes from Sweden. The elves of Iceland, whenever they're building roads or buildings, if there's a spot that they think elves live, they will build around it. Wow. Africa. I mean, every continent has these stories. Now, as a matter of fact, in Indonesia, there were stories of the Ibu Gogo, which means grandmother who eats everything. Wow. Which were these 2 to 3 feet tall people who would sneak in to the islanders' villages and steal children and take them away and eat them. And, Westerners thought that these were just stories.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2004 on the island of Flores, they found a cave with a bunch of skeletons of adults that were 2 to 3 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
So they even, gave it a new name, the Homo florensis. They dubbed them the hobbits because of their size. But those actually existed.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to the Pukwudgies, again, they're 2 to 3 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
They have large nose, large ears.
Mm-hmm.
They can turn invisible. They are extremely strong. They don't like regular sized people and will either play tricks on them, harmless tricks, or lead them to their death in the forest.
Oh.
And if they get really mad, they will shoot them with poison arrows. That story is not just of the Pukwudgies, of Massachusetts and that New England area that includes the Bridgewater Triangle, but in South Dakota, Utah, those stories are all across the United States. And I'm thinking, American Indian tribes, it's a heck of a long way from Massachusetts to Utah. And they have exactly the same stories of exactly the same beings. All right, there could be something there.
Well, I'm kind of stuck on the grandma a go-go. All right, let's get to this question here. This is from Kimberly Miller. She says, might monsters be the cause of thousands of persons who go missing in the national parks? And, of course, I think she's talking about David Pilati's Missing 411 book, where he documents all these missing people. And I think what I read, and we're trying to schedule him online, but he said that sometimes they would be missing, but their clothes would be folded. So what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I'm really familiar with his work, and he's done some really excellent work on all of these missing people. And he's, narrowed it down because people go missing all the time, but he narrowed his down to certain criteria and what they could be. He never has said what he thinks could have caused this, all these people missing. But, it could be monsters. It could be people. It could be extraterrestrials for all we know. These people could be walking through one of the window areas and just disappearing. But I think when it comes to I think it could be all of the above. But I think sometimes, in some cases, monsters have something to do with it. There was one case, I don't remember what state it was in, but a little girl. It was a logging camp, and a truck went up to the top of the hill and would come back with logs. And this little girl's dad was the boss, and he would let her ride up on the truck and then come back. And when she went up on the truck once, she didn't come back. She disappeared, and they hunted for her all over the place, and they finally found her. And she said that the bear man had taken her and had fed her berries out of his hand, and he'd eaten her hat. Well, I mean, a bear man, what does that sound like? Bigfoot?
Sounds pretty creepy to me, man. I don't think I'd be taking. He could be saying candy little girl. Who knows? But there are a lot of people missing, and it really goes. For some, they believe it's much worse than just say either alien abduction or Bigfoot abduction. It goes more into cannibal or maybe even sexual exploitation abduction. So there's a lot of creeps out there. From Gord, this is another one from Canada. What about orcs? They out there?
Orcs. Well, I mean, the orcs were derived from the legend of goblins from Europe, and when it comes to all the different terms, orcs, goblins, kobolds, elves, trolls, all of those were basically the same words for the same creatures in Europe. They were sectioned off to look like what they look like by J.R.R. Tolkien whenever he wrote The Lord of the Rings. And then when Dungeons and Dragons came around, it just adopted Tolkien's descriptions of them. So, I mean, Orcs, goblins, basically the same thing. And when I was, talking about the puckwudgie and the other small creatures across the U.S., I mean, they're all over Europe too. I mean, I think I think there's probably something to it.
Jason, I'm trying to hang with you, man, but every time you say that, I hear wedgie, puck wedgie. I don't know. It's
Wudgie.
wedgie. Okay, not wedgie. Okay. It's Cowboys, man. We've been out in the range too long.
Well, and you know what? If they were puck wedgies, they
Yeah.
wouldn't be shooting people with poison arrows.
Okay, well, I
They'd
guess
be yanking up their underwear.
Okay, that's the good way. Good way, or it could be a Catholic priest. All right, here we go. It says this is interesting too. Nine Lives. I'm not sure which chat it's from, but it says, "Can frequencies bring monsters into our realm?" There's been a lot of talk about frequencies and vibrations, and maybe the frequencies actually are the entry point to another dimension. And is it possible then, if we discover what that frequency is, that we could go into those different dimensions ourselves?
Wow, that's some sci-fi stuff that could have some basis in fact. I don't have I'm not comfortable in saying yes or no, but man, frequencies do a lot of strange things that we don't know. And they very well could, call something or open the doorway and allow something to come in or out. I would love to see what it's like in another dimension whenever one of these windows opens up, and a redneck steps through, or maybe a clown.
Oh hell no, not a clown.
Yeah. So
No
what are
way.
they thinking in these other dimensions when these things step in?
And why is you when you talk about monsters, though, man? You mentioned a lot in your book. The Maine Goat Man, the Ozark Howler, the Chupacabra, Bigfoot, Dogman, gnomes, but scarier than them all are clowns. Why? Why, Jason?
Clowns absolutely
They're
terrify
yes.
me. They always have. There was even in England. This has been about 6-7 years ago. In this children's hospital, they decided to decorate the children's, the illness ward, and they decorated it with pictures of clowns, and the children hated it. Well, yeah, of course they hated it. Of course it was full of clowns. The reason, I think, with clowns is that their faces are hidden by makeup. Their smiles are painted on. They're not smiling a lot of times when they look like they're smiling. So there's so much hidden about the motives and the personality of a clown. I mean, there's a great reason why Stephen King picked a clown to be the villain in It. Because yes, they're smiling, they're laughing, but you know what? They're really not. There's more going on.
And really, there have been sightings of clowns too, and I don't know who dresses up to terrify people to do that, but they're actually literally clowns out there, just like on the side of the street, and that's all you got to do to terrify somebody, just to be a clown on the street.
There was a guy. There was a case in Washington State just a couple of days ago. There were some young teenagers at home alone, and their parents were gone out to dinner or something. They were coming home, but there was something at the window, and it kind of freaked them out, and they looked, and there was a man dressed as a clown looking at them in the window, and it wasn't a mask, and the guy went full face paint, and he was trying to get them to open the door, and of course they didn't, but then he moved over toward the door and was jiggling the door handle.
Yikes.
And
Classic horror.
I mean, it was Washington State, so the kids just ran upstairs, locked the door, and called the police. It's a good thing he didn't pull this in Texas, because he wouldn't have been around.
Seemed like they'd run upstairs and being in Washington State, they'd probably fire up some joints, man. Hey, I'm saying, hey, this could be even more fun. Naked in Florida in our live chat from our website says, I've seen a dimensional window open before. So I'm certain that those things exist. Here's a question from Leon Mohan out of our YouTube chat. It says, Jason, did you ever follow the late, great J.C. Johnson's research in the Four Corners?
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry to say not.
Okay. And then Raul Sanchez has this question. Have you ever heard of bat humanoids?
Other than, the Weekly World News Bat Boy? Well, there have been there have been some cases in Mexico, some reports of seeing some, humanoids flying on bat wings. But I mean, I've just, other than reading a couple of the stories, I really haven't followed it. No.
This is from Kevin in Massachusetts out of the live chat. It says, Jason, have you ever bounced any of your research off biblical or apocryphal texts?
No, although I do think of that. I've got a number of stories in my book, Chasing American Monsters, on giants, because the Bible talked about giants. It didn't talk enough about giants because, the books of Enoch talk more about giants. And whenever you think of, go to Sunday school, they talk about giants. It's one giant. It's Goliath, and that's it. And no, even in the Bible, not the Apocrypha, it talks about the Valley of Giants. It talks about cities of giants. It talks about Goliath's brothers. So there were tons of giants out there, and there have been giant stories all over the world, and evidence of giants. There are museums in Mexico and South America that have giant skulls and giant bones. Well, where did these come from? And if the Bible talked about them and there's some evidence for it, why isn't it biblical? Yeah, I think that, giants very well could have existed, may still exist.
Well, you see, that right there goes to the knowledge part that we're discussing here, that we might think we know everything, but you alluded to that giant. I mean, everybody's heard sort of, the David and Goliath, and I would think most people would say there was one giant, like you say, but it's not one giant. The text doesn't say it. It said there were villages of them, but that doesn't get into the narrative. It doesn't get out there. It's not a fun story. It's more of a reality. And I believe that more and more skeletons of giants are being dug up.
Well, you hear about that every once in a while, and there are lots of stories about these skeletons back in the day being, sent off to the Smithsonian and then disappearing. I mean, I don't know what I can base that on. I mean, just stories, but why would it be? Why would it be productive? Why would people think of burying that kind of story if there was actual evidence of giants on this planet?
Well, we're not going to be talking about American monsters, chasing American monsters, without one of my scariest monsters that I believe exists. And those are the monsters underneath a bed or in the closet. First of all, I want to know why they reside there and what do they look like?
Well, when it comes to underneath the bed, have you ever crawled underneath the bed? It's really quiet under there. It's dark. It's really calm. I don't have a problem. I think monsters under the bed are just chilling out. The closet, on the other hand, is a serious problem, because what kind of monsters hang out in a closet? Ones who are too scared to go underneath the bed. I don't want to mess with those monsters. Okay, clowns. It's got to be clowns in the closet.
Crap, man. Well, so if you hear a noise in the closet, do not open it up at night.
Especially if it goes weep weep. Yeah.
Well, and we've talked about this on the show, and people usually respond the same way I do, and that is, why don't we sleep? Why don't we let our arms hang over the bed? And most people that in the chats we've talked about it, they say they don't do it. Do you do that? Would you let your hand go over the bed, like when there's a space under your bed?
Oh, absolutely.
You would.
Yeah, I go to sleep like that all the time.
Well, obviously, because you're out there searching for monsters, and you want one of them to grab your hand so you can put that in your book.
I can wrestle the thing. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I sleep like that all the time.
What if they're cannibals and start eating your hand, Jason? You got to think about these things, man. There's real danger there.
Yeah, I'm not scared of monsters.
Not scared of monsters.
The only time I would be scared of monsters is, if I was actually outside my house.
So
when people talk about, and this is something. Let's get back to Bigfoot for a second.
Okay.
One of the problems people have with Bigfoot encounters are that where the pictures, all the pictures we see are fuzzy or grainy or too dark. Okay, if I was out in the woods and saw a Bigfoot, I would be too terrified to do anything. I would be too terrified to think to pull my phone out to take the picture.
Right.
I would run. Okay, so yeah, I'm scared. I would be scared of a monster in its own habitat, not mine. Gets in my house, yeah, I can take care of it. One of the pictures you showed up there was a book that I'd written called, it's a parody guidebook called How to Kill Monsters Using Common Household Items.
Right.
So if any monster comes into my house, I've got things all over the place that I can take care of them.
Now, we say I see there's utensils back here. Obviously, some killing effect there. But I mean, do you have to dip anything in salt or holy water or anything, or these household items deadly enough on their own?
Oh, they're deadly enough on their own. Turning over a trash can, especially if you've got a tuna can lid, a monster treading on that won't be able to chase you. If you've got a dog, man, or werewolf in your house, always make sure you have a cat. So you can pick up the cat and throw it at the werewolf, and you'll have plenty of time to escape while it's dealing with the cat. Yeah. And, gnomes are terrifying. I have a lawnmower. I can take care of a gnome.
It seems to me in the movie The Mummy was scared of cats. So all that had to do is to get rid of a mummy is show him a cat. And I don't know why that is. Something creepy about cats. Of course, cats are always creeping around anyway, so who knows what they're up to.
Yeah, well, and I also, like, for mummies, they're really prone to fire, so I keep bottles of vodka all over the house. I know when my kids, parents come over to pick them up, they, kind of think that's weird. Should we let the kids come over to Offutt's house? I don't know, but, I'm protecting them.
Well, you're certainly the guy to have around on Halloween night for ghost stories. That's for daggone sure. Brian Ewing out of the YouTube chat. What do you think about the Mothman?
Wow. I've always been fascinated by the Mothman. Yeah, well, when this was, 67, 68, when this Mothman started appearing, there was two couples making out. One of the couples was married. I think the other couple was not married, but they were all out in the same car making out in the TNT area outside Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The TNT area got its name because it made ammunition for wars, many of our wars. It had been shut down at that point, and there were just abandoned factory buildings. And all of a sudden, one of the people looked up, and there was a tall, dark humanoid figure with blazing red eyes staring at the car. Not the sort of thing you want to have for a romantic evening with your girl. And they decided we need to get out. So they started driving, and the thing lifted up in the air. And they started driving faster because they were getting scared. And somebody looked out the window, and the thing was over the car, and its wings were wider than the car was.
Wow.
And eventually they left it behind, but more and more people started seeing it. And then there were Men in Black encounters in that town telling the people who saw Mothman that you didn't see anything. Don't talk about this to anybody. And then Mothman was seen around the Silver Bridge, and then later the Silver Bridge collapsed that was full of cars and killed quite a few people. And then shortly after that, the Mothman stopped showing up in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And this is one of the evidences that Keel, who wrote the book, The Mothman Prophecies, had about window areas, and that the Mothman could have come through and then gone back. That's why he showed up for a while and then disappeared.
Well, you bring up a point there in my mind I was thinking, do monsters stop appearing when we stop believing in monsters?
That is a great question. There are a lot of cases of monsters that people start talking about. So there are more and more monster encounters. Black-eyed kids have been like that. There was an encounter in 98 or 99. A journalist in Texas, his name was Brian Bethel, had stopped at a strip mall at, I don't know, it was like 11 or 12 at night after he got off work to pay his cable bill. He started writing out his check. He was going to slip it through the night deposit. And all of a sudden he noticed that there were two people standing outside his window. And he had his window cracked about an inch, and they were kids. They were 16, 14, something like that. And they were wearing hoodies. And the first kid who was standing right next to the window said, "Let us into your car. We need to go back to our house and get money for the movie." And they said what movie it was. And Brian looked over at the marquee in the strip mall at this movie theater, and the movie had started like an hour ago. So he knew the kids were up to something. And they were also talking, or the main one, the one who was talking a lot more maturely than he should have. And then he started demanding, let me in your car.
Wow.
And Brian got kind of scared, and he noticed the other kid started circling toward the back of his car, kind of like a predator does when you see one, but the other one goes around behind you to attack. And he also, even though he was scared, he got the feeling that he should open the door for them. And then he saw their eyes, which were completely black. No irises, no no whites, and they were just totally black like a shark's. And he got terrified and tore out of there, right there. And that terrified him. I interviewed him a few years ago, and he said he still lives in the same town.
Wow.
And he hates driving by that strip mall because he doesn't want to see those kids again. But after that happened, people started reporting black-eyed kids encounters. And that hadn't been a thing before Bethel reported it. They've kind of tapered off some. It's the same with the Slender Man.
But
Slender Man.
Jason, doesn't that mean though that if you stop believing that they were imaginary to begin with?
You see, that's what I'm getting toward. The Slender Man was the same thing. It was a totally made up character. For the internet, it was a contest, and this guy won with the Slender Man. But then people started reporting seeing it and encountering it. So it seems like whenever we put lots of energy believing in something, it will appear. And when we stop believing, it disappears. So, yeah, I agree with that.
So we could say that monsters then appear by permission.
I don't know if it's by permission or if some entity out there realizes that there's a lot of energy being focused on one thing, it becomes that one thing. There are a lot of, entities, angels, fallen angels, elemental type creatures out there that have powers that we don't understand. And if they realize that something is happening, people are really wanting to see something, it will be that something.
All right, for those of you who joined the broadcast, we have on our Newsmaker line tonight via Skype, Jason Offutt talking about Chasing American Monsters. By the way, Jason, how can people get that book?
Amazon.com or from my publisher, Llewellyn. Llewellyn Worldwide Books.
Yeah, we've dealt with a number of guests from there that have written books there. Question from Raul says from YouTube says, what do you think of the TV show Mountain Monsters? Is that real or staged?
I cut my cable years ago, so I've never watched it. But I will say from experience talking to people who've been on various monster shows, it's probably staged. I interviewed a guy who was on the Finding Bigfoot, and during one of the episodes, they nothing was happening, so a rock hit the water, and everybody was like, "Oh, it's Bigfoot! They just threw a rock at us!" And the guy saw that it was not a rock. He watched a frog jump from a log into the water, and that's what everybody freaked out about.
Well, I tell you what, in a group situation, there's a monster there. All you got to do is outrun whoever the hell you're with.
Somebody's got to be slower than you.
And why is it though? In typical horror monster movies, somebody's always screaming instead of running. I mean, I don't get that. They should know by now that screaming is just a call out, and you're wasting valuable time between you and the monster and certain death. I figure scream later, but why is that people always got to scream first?
You know what? That doesn't bother me nearly as much as somebody's always falls down.
Well, yeah, they can't run right. I'm thinking, you know what? If I'm being chased, I'm not going to fall down if I'm running.
Yeah.
But again, all you got to do is get ahead of them people. Says Kimberly Miller asked this question. She says, "Can entities be summoned by our psychic images?"
Well, that also goes with thinking about something. Seriously, if you think about something hard enough, it might show up. Right. So don't dwell on things unless it's something positive.
Okay, so you're thinking the best way to conquer monsters. I mean, you obviously got the book How to Kill Monsters, but you won't have to kill them if they don't exist. So you could frankly preempt their entry into your life by not giving them permission, not thinking about them.
Well, right, isn't that how the Kirk and crew got rid of Apollo in the Star Trek episode Who Mourns for Adonis?
Right.
They stopped believing in him.
Right. Yeah, that kind of sad there. But what about people who've been abducted? They're not thinking, hey, reptilian, come down and abduct me and do some anal probes or something, man. I don't think people are actually thinking that, are they?
No, they're not. I don't know. I don't know what some freaky people get into.
Well, that would be kinky, but I'm just saying the whole spectra of that. It doesn't appear that people are calling down entities from another world to pretend they're aliens to do sexual experiments on them,
right,
or whatever.
Right. This is a special case. I mean, I think. Okay. All this other stuff happens, you know. I don't think, somebody's thinking about, man, I really want to get, be clubbed by Bigfoot tonight. I'm going to go out in the woods and it's going to happen. People don't think that. So this sort of stuff happens because it happens. But there are, I think, rare occasions to where people put enough, mental energy into something that it will manifest. I mean, it comes to the tulpas. You've heard of tulpas.
Yeah.
That's a manifestation just for mental energy of making a human appear.
Well, Jason, going back to Stephen King and It, I mean, here's a guy who's always coming up with creatures and monsters and stuff. I mean, you talk about somebody who spends an enormous amount of time thinking about it, then wouldn't that mean that he's got monsters in his life?
Well, you know what? That's kind of funny because he wrote a book called The Dark Half, which is about an author who wrote under a pseudonym, and the pseudonym was that author was really popular and really violent, and he'd written his last book as that author. Well, that author came to life and pulled himself out of the ground and tried to force him to write another book. So, I mean, he has explored an author's other side, that was manifested inside the original author's brain. So, well, who knows? Maybe it was a true story.
Well, as far as that goes, I mean, Stephen King is vehemently hateful of Donald Trump and continues. I'm just wondering if Stephen King has become a monster of hate himself.
I follow since I'm into horror and I've read almost everything King's written. I follow him on Twitter, and he really hates the Don. He spews a lot of dislike toward Donald Trump.
So hasn't he become the monster that he writes about in his movies?
Well, maybe that should be proposed to him.
Question come in and says, in your search, have you met any of these monsters that you write about?
Fortunately, no. I've had some ghost encounters during my years of investigating hauntings, but also before that. But when it comes to cryptozoology, I have not, which is fine because I love cryptozoological stories as long as they're happening to somebody else. I want somebody else to see the Goat Man. I don't want to see the Goat Man.
Do you follow Lauren Coleman?
Yes, actually, Lauren Coleman wrote a jacket blurb for my book, Chasing American Monsters.
Nice, very nice. We had him on the show. What about this Ozark Howler? What's going on there?
Well, it's a bear dog type creature with horns that howls. It's
bear dog.
Yeah, it's been encountered in southern Missouri and northern Arkansas for as long as people can remember. And I mean, it's mostly known for the howls, but it's also, pet mutilation, pet deaths. the deaths of small livestock, anywhere from chicken to sheep, have been blamed on the Ozark Howler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the people who've seen it said that it looks like a cross between a bear and a dog,
Mm-hmm.
but it's got horns.
Mm-hmm. Somebody wrote, "Do you believe in reptilian shapeshifters?"
I don't have an opinion on that. I like listening to stories about them, but I don't have an opinion on it.
They're out there. Okay, I'm just saying. I guess because one of them's been watching this show for quite a while. What about the Minotaur? Is that real? Or Minotaur?
Well, yeah, the Minotaur. Here's the deal about Greek mythology. They told some great stories, but what parts were true?
Mm-hmm.
If we put together, and it's something we talked about a little bit earlier, the biblical stories about, the Nephilim coming down and mating with human women and having offspring that were wrong. They were giants. They mated with animals.
Ooh.
So if the Nephilim mated with animals, that really sounds like a lot of creatures in the Greek mythology. That sounds like Pan the Goat Man. That sounds like a centaur.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a cyclops. That sounds like a minotaur.
Mm-hmm. All good creatures.
Yeah, I'm not saying that any of these things have existed because we don't have any evidence, physical evidence of them. But I mean, that could be an explanation if they do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe off the beaten path here, but are dreams areas where monsters can freely roam?
Wow, I love Freddy Krueger stories. Yeah. Dreams are absolutely amazing. Have you ever had a lucid dream, a dream that felt like it was real?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I had one that felt like it was real. Only one that I've had like this, and I was running away from somebody, and I got to a town, and it was a small town, and it was basically a lot like the very first Twilight Zone episode. The town was empty. There was nobody there, and there were cigarettes smoldering in ashtrays. There was coffee that was still warm in a cup. Looked like people had just gotten up and left right in the middle of everything. And I found them in a church, and they were all vampires.
Wow.
And I felt my neck being bitten, and I felt getting weaker. And then, I woke up, and I felt weak and wobbly. And what just happened? I probably just had a dream, but it could have been something real. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dreams are the human mind is a bizarre organ.
Well, along that, you might not be a dream specialist, but doesn't a dream is a production? It's a movie. Somebody has to choreograph it. It has to be choreographed in some coherent way. I mean, you got this happens here, this goes here. There's these people doing this and that. In every scene like that, there has to be some organization to choreograph that movie to play in the dream sequence. What's doing the choreographing?
Well, I mean, even after telling you that dream and that it felt real, I felt the pain in my neck with the teeth. I still am certain that dreams are. The choreographer's your head. It's your brain. You're just blowing off steam. That's what I think. I have some really great dreams. I had a dream a couple of years ago, and I wrote it all down, and it was a novella entitled Matriarchal Nazi Cannibals.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know about your dreams there. All right. We got this one here. Brian says, Jason, what do you think about the folk monster?
Oh, gosh, that was a lot of my childhood. That's the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek.
Ooh.
Yeah, from Arkansas.
There.
Yeah. That's that's a great story. That sounded like the family. I mean, from everything that I've read, that sounds like something the family actually encountered. And if I remember correctly, the folk monster had three-toed footprints. And this is something else about Bigfoot that I think is absolutely bizarre, is that if Bigfoot is real, it should probably look like Bigfoot. But there are Bigfoot reported looking like gorillas, Bigfoot reported looking like big hairy people.
Mm-hmm.
In Florida, they look like orangutans. There are chimpanzee-like Bigfoot, and then we have the folk monster with three-toed footprints. We also have the Honey Island monster down in Louisiana with three-toed footprints.
Wow.
And Momo, the Missouri monster, with three-toed footprints. What sort of mammal has three-toed footprints?
A freaky one?
A freaky one, yeah, absolutely. There aren't mammals with three-toed footprints, but it's interesting that it all coincides. It's all the Missouri River. The Momo was over in Louisiana, Missouri, which is just above St. Louis,
Mm-hmm.
and the folk monster is not that far from the Missouri River, and the Honey Island swamp monster is not that far from the Mississippi River.
Mm-hmm.
So it could just be that monster traveling back and forth, or a family of them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the folk monster is it's a great story.
Do monsters exist in the daytime, or is it only nighttime? What is that?
Oh, sure. No. People see monsters in the daytime all the time.
Really?
Yeah. The thing about, and this happens with ghosts too, because I've written a lot about ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
People tend to notice more in the night because during the day there's so much going on. During the day we've got, traffic noises, we've got light everywhere, human activity, we might hear a radio over here, and at night everything's quiet. So we're a lot more perceptive
Mm-hmm.
to seeing and hearing and feeling things at night.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think that humans have a built-in perception for beings that aren't visible to the human eye?
Yeah, I really do. I really do. There have been a few times I've gone to a supposedly haunted spot, and when I got there and I got out of my car, I would have a panic attack. My chest would hurt. It would grow tight. I would start sweating. I'd get goose flesh. My breathing would be labored, and I felt the fight or flight, and I just had to get out of there.
All right.
So I left, and a day or two later, I'd go back to the same place. Everything would be fine. So it could be that there was an entity there, or maybe there's a bobcat in the trees. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt something, and I recommend to people, if they feel that, to leave.
Mm-hmm.
You can come back later, but if you feel that, leave.
So in Chasing American Monsters, are these stories of the possibility that monsters exist, or are they just a compilation of stories and they probably don't exist?
Oh, again, I'm going to answer yes. There are stories in there. There
Okay.
are stories in there to where I'm certain these monsters are real.
Mm-hmm.
And there's stories in there like the rock slide bolter from Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
It's that I'm certain it doesn't exist. The rock slide bolter is when people were traveling west, and this was during the silver and gold mining times. The gold rush, where people wanted to scare other people off of their claims. That in the Colorado mountains, that there was a monster as big as a whale. Actually, it looked like a whale, except it didn't have a fluked tail. It had a hook.
Ooh.
And that hook held on to the top of a mountain. And when it would see miners coming up, it would let go of the hook, slide down the rocks,
Right.
and swallow them whole. Okay? That doesn't exist. That never existed.
Sure sounds like a lot of fun, though.
Your Ozark Howler, your Bigfoot, I'll even go as far as saying your Wendigo, your Puckwudgie, a werewolf of Lawton, Oklahoma. There's enough evidence that these things actually appeared that, I'd say they're probably real.
Okay. Well, Jason Offutt, I appreciate you coming back on the Edge television broadcast. Now, where can people get your book, Chasing American Monsters?
It's at Amazon.com. It's at Llewellyn worldwide. It's at JasonOffutt.com.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone.
Okay. Well, appreciate you coming on the show. Can we have you back again sometime?
Daniel, I would love it. I've had a great time. Thank you very much.
I appreciate you coming on the show, man. And you see a monster, do what I do. Just run.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.